always say I look like Don Cheadle, and I don't look a goddamn thing like Don Cheadle. Just a bunch of little stupid ass crackers thinking that. So anyone who's been around black people don't think I look like Don Cheadle. There's only a bunch of crackers and a bunch of little retarded Gen Z black dudes saying stupid stuff like that. And most of these trolls are autistic, so yeah. I'm gonna keep going on about that because I want people to I want to drill it into people's heads that it's not worth like going back and forth with trolls because most of them are semi-retarded or they're autistic. Kind of the same thing. But anyway, that's all that's what I'm gonna say. Not only that, a lot of the rage bait people are doing aren't even they're not even American. So I had another live stream scheduled, but I thought this one would be fun. So I'm going to do this one, and then I'll do the other one another time. So, so yeah, this is called In Defense of BS College Majors. I am actually going to defend bullshit college majors. Somewhat. I'm not going to say that you should do them necessarily, but I will give a full hearted defense of them. Not a justification for them, but a defense of them. Not exactly the same thing. Well, kind of the same thing, but let's say it's a weak justification for them in this defense. I thought it'd be fun. I always talk about college related stuff because it always interests me, and also because a lot of people on YouTube, especially these red pill content creators, give such bad information about college. So I like to, even though I don't have a huge following, I figure if someone accidentally clicks on my broadcast, whether live or in the watching it after it's been rebroadcasted, they could get a little information. So hello to everyone coming in live stream. But yeah, and also I will take questions about education if people have them. Um, but well, what do I want to say? So yeah, I'm gonna defend BS college majors because I would say for 30 years it's been easy to dump on non-STEM college majors. Because and that's the other thing is that everyone has a different idea of BS college majors. So I'm gonna give what I consider an actual BS major, and then I'm gonna go over what people in general think of BS majors, which is quite subjective, which is part of the reason why I'm defending BS majors in the first place, is that it's subjective. um, so usually when people say BS majors, again, it's quite subjective, but usually they usually they usually referring to anything that falls under liberal arts or social sciences. But everything that falls under liberal arts and social sciences is not necessarily a BS major. Um, then there are folks who think anything that falls under STEM is a good major. And again, not every STEM major is a good major. I've talked about this before in a live stream a few weeks ago. If people want to take the time to look over that, but I've talked about this before. Um, and usually I do dump on BS majors myself, but I dump on the majors that I find to be useless. So I have a much more strict criterion of BS majors than most people do. While I'm doing that, let me fix my chat filter here so I'm not just getting useless messages. Oh, okay. So anyway, like I said, so it's quite subjective. Usually, most people think of again BS majors as being anything that falls within liberal arts or social sciences, whereas they think any good major is a STEM major, and that's a lot. That's a bit due to propaganda. And then you have a bunch of folks who either never went to college or they only have us or they only majored in something STEM field related. So they are themselves biased and think everything that falls outside of STEM is useless. Um, like this person saying college is a scam. No, it's not. Statistically, people who have a college degree make more money. That's just facts. That's just facts. And then people say, well, then I've heard people in the red pill space say, well, those those stats are skewed because it incorporates just it incorporates the outsized success of people who go on to law and medicine and engineering. Uh, yes and no. Even if that is okay, even if let's take that line of reasoning that the fact that statistics show that people with college degrees earn more money throughout their lifetime is skewed towards people with professional degrees. Let's say that's true. Even so, your college degree is is necessary today because it's normally your entrance into it is your entry. You need it for entry level jobs nowadays. Any entry level jobs ask for degrees, even if the even if the job itself doesn't require one. This is why you need a college degree in order to make amount a decent amount of money, unless you are getting a professional, unless you are getting a skilled trade. But here's the thing: trade school is just as expensive as college. People are taking out loans and scholarships to go to trade school too. So the only the other route that you can take if you're not going to trade school or you're not going to college is the military, where you can learn a skilled trade for free and get paid for it. That is an option, but a lot of that is an option. However, the problem is almost 80% of the country doesn't qualify for military for to enlist in the military. A lot of you motherfuckers are out of shape. You're mentally you're mentally fucked up, like these trolls here on YouTube, or you can't, or you don't even have the intellect to qualify for basic as to get a basic ASVAB score. So almost 80% of the country doesn't even qualify for military enlistment. And then, like I said, if you're not doing that, you need to go to college or go to professional trade school. And again, professional trade school is not cheap. This is not the 70s. So saying college is a scam is something said by a moron who's never been to college, or it's a person who went to college and took a useless degree. That's why you shouldn't listen to these. I consider myself red pill, but I criticize the red pill as well because I recognize when they're saying a bunch of bullshit. It takes someone in the red pill space to call out the bullshit in the red pill space. And a lot of these red pill people talk bullshit when it comes to higher education. This is why I did a previous live stream about this 2 weeks ago when I said you shouldn't listen to red pillers when it comes to higher education because they don't know what they're talking about. Raphael says not because of the college degree, because the people in the positions to get a degree have the material conditions to succeed regardless. And when has that never been the case? Again, that's not completely true. We live, there's more meritocracy today than there has been in the history of America or the history of higher ed. You know, it is on the onus is on you to do something with yourself when you're in high school. If you are too busy smoking weed and doing TikTok and thinking you're cool, then that's your fucking fault. You want to drop out and be a moron? That's on you. Don't sit there and say college is a scam because it's only built for successful people. Ever since the Higher Education Act that came out, and that the Higher Education Act has been around since 1965. The Higher Education Act has put more people in college in the past, what, 60 years since, other than, the GI Bill from the 1940s after World War II. With both the GI Bill and the Higher Education Act, there's really no excuse other than your lack of intellect or being a dumbass in school. That's it. That's your fault. I'm not saying it's only for the privileged. Yes, the privileged have an easier way into school, but there has been scholarships and loans and so forth and so on literally since the 40s for people to go into school. Not only that, college was free up until like the 70s and 80s. College was either free or so low, or the tuition was so low you could literally pay for an entire year of college working a summer job. So don't say it's only for the privileged. That's why it's a scam. You literally don't know what you're talking about. You're just making up excuses for your lack of success of going to college. That's it. That's You're just making up excuses. Up and like I said, since the 40s, you had the GI Bill, and you had other things that came out during the New Deal and all this other stuff that made it easier. This is and this led to the rise of the so-called BS college major in the first place. So you're already jumping the gun here. So that was one of the things I was going to get into in the first place. Before people talked about BS college majors, that only came about in the 70s and 80s as more people were entering college. So the elite wanted a way to separate themselves from the lower classes who were coming into college in droves. This is what drove the cost of education of college up in the first place, because they wanted to try to keep the lower classes from entering into college, and thereby weakening the value of a college degree, which we see happening now. So they made college more expensive. On top of that, the government starts subsidizing these federal scholarships and loans, and by doing so, colleges could charge whatever they wanted. Like the rise of college tuitions went up like 3,000%, because they know that they could charge those fees, because those federal student loans, those Stafford loans, those federal Pell Grants, and other scholarships could assuage the cost. This is why you'll have, the cost of Stanford being going from somewhere like, you know, $2,000 a year to like uh what 40,000 a year. So people don't know what they're talking about. Uh let me I gotta put on my glasses. I can't read your your username. Apologies in advance. Like Turtle says, people find any majors outside of STEM to be useless if they don't make money off it. History is very interesting to learn about unless you are going to teach it and get paid. You won't care for it. Good point. Good point. So and so yeah. So again, that's why I want to get into the very history of BS majors. See, the BS the concept of the bullshit major came about around somewhere, I'm guessing around the 80s and 90s, because until the 70s, like I said, with the Higher Education Act and the implementation of the GI Bill in the 1940s, like there weren't that many people going to college, and it wasn't because of the cost. Because again, a lot of college was free back then. The reason why a lot of people weren't going to college was, yes, it was quite privileged. Often it was just for white males, which led to the creation of the HBCUs, the historically black colleges and universities, so that black students could go. Also, there were female only colleges because, again, they couldn't get into those elite institutions either. Like Harvard and Yale and Princeton were all male. So that led to the creation of these elite female institutions uh, like Bryn Mawr and all of those schools. Goucher College here in Baltimore. Um, and you also had Jewish colleges as well. So the difference was, and this is where I talked about HBCUs in my previous live stream 2 weeks ago. The difference is, once these elite institutions accepted all racial backgrounds and became co-ed, the the Jewish only colleges, the female only colleges became obsolete. So they adapted by allowing so the female only colleges, most of them have became co-ed now. Or even if, well, some of them are still female only, but they have like co-ed graduate programs. Because I almost applied to one. I think um, what's one of them? I think it's Mount Holyoke or whatever. One of them where one of my professors went. He was he was a he was my nutrition science professor, and he was in the food science department at my alma mater, but he was trained as a neuroscientist. His background was actually in neuroscience, but his specialty was in food science. And he said he did his graduate work at, I think it was Mount Holyoke or whatever. But it's a historic. It's one of those historic female only institutions. They were like the female Ivy Leagues of their time. And now, they've adapted by being co-ed, at least on the graduate level. And that's kind of what I was hinting at with HBCUs in my previous live stream from a few weeks ago. I was saying HBCUs have become largely obsolete for for superior black students. Like HBCUs now are pretty much only known for mediocre black students. And in order for HBCUs to adopt, I mean to adapt and thrive, now that the the best black students are gonna they have to compete for those superior black students with elite institutions. They need they need to become more multi. These historically black colleges and universities need to be multiracial. Anyway, getting back to the BS majors. So the fact that so few people up until like the 80s were going to college, the BS major wasn't really a thing because it was so rare for a person to have a degree outside of the elite, outside of the wealthy elite, that any major was looked at as sort of like your key into the what was called the professional managerial class. Your degree was basically your ticket, your entry ticket into the professional managerial class. It didn't matter what it was. Now I would say even up until the 80s, it really didn't matter what your degree was. But again, once more people from the lower classes in the 70s, 80s started going to college, you the elite tried, wanted to separate themselves. So you had a lot of them going, uh, diverting into majors for that led to professional careers in like medical and law and stuff like that. That was around the 70s and 80s. But by the 90s and 2000s, the elite weren't doing that anymore. The elites were intentionally going back to what was considered the BS majors. But here's the thing, the irony is the middle class and the lower classes are always like two steps behind what the elite are doing. So this is the other trick that people don't tell you about. What's up, J.A.C? I mean, sorry, Carlton. I'm saying my own name. What's up? What's up, Carlton? And what's up, Moonlit? I like the new name, by the way. Um, kick that hydro ghetto. But anyway, as I'm talking, I'm actually wearing my alma mater right here. Maryland is considered a public Ivy now, so I'm repping. Well, I was repping before, so I've always repped when it's repping time. Let me stop. But anyway, getting back to the subject. So, like I said, until the 70s and 80s, when the lower classes were starting to filter into higher education, it really didn't matter what your degree was in because as long as you had that 4 year degree, that was sort of your ticket into the professional managerial class. Then once the lower classes started filtering more into higher education, the elite separated themselves by by um, going into mostly professional driven majors like mainly like medicine and law, medicine, law, accounting, stuff like that, right? Um, and of course, business was always hot. As a matter of fact, I think that was I think that's what a lot of people did who didn't have for the elite, because not the thing, not all wealthy elite are smart. So we already know that. That can stem back to my other live stream from the other day about IQ and intellectual disparity amongst the races. Uh, the wealthy elite, not all of them are that bright. So one of the things they may have when it, so one of the things that became really big in the 70s and 80s was the MBA, the Masters of Business Administration. That was big. Some people still get the MBA. The MBA is I'm going to say this. The MBA is a useless graduate degree. I don't fight me. I don't care. It's a useless graduate degree. Anyway, but that was the rate, that was the thing in the 70s and 80s. And like I said, the thing is about the middle and lower classes, they're always two steps behind the elite. So they don't catch on to what the elite is doing until the elite has already until it's already become passe amongst the elite. And then once they see the middle and lower classes doing it, they no longer desire it. So by the time the 90s came around and the middle and lower classes caught on to they should be going into pre-med and pre-law and accounting and finance and getting their MBA. By that time, the elite had already shifted again. So the elite has shifted back to the very degrees that have been considered useless. Here's the twist: because those degrees were considered useless, it was a mark of privilege that you would go and take a useless degree because it's showing that you don't need it. Yeah. So this is why when you go into higher ed now, you see a swelling of people in the liberal arts and the social sciences who are mostly, you know, white privileged kids from the, the upper and upper middle classes, whereas usually first year students, I mean, first generation students, especially those of immigrants, usually go into the STEM fields. But again, like I said, it's become a mark of privilege amongst the elite to intentionally take useless degrees. And so that's and so I want to steer this into my definition of a BS degree, which I've talked about multiple times. But my definition of a BS major is not the same as what most people consider. Like I said, most people's definition of a BS major is highly subjective, and it usually just means them shitting on anything dealing with liberal arts or social sciences. I don't, I don't, I don't take that line of thought. Instead, I separate a BS major from a practical major, not from a STEM major, because not all STEM majors are practical. For me, a BS major is a major in which you don't need that degree to get that job within that field. That to me is a BS major. And so that's why I said communications is a bullshit degree, because there's no career field within communications in which you actually need a communications degree to do it. Like there's like public relations, um, journalism, being a I don't know, personal assistant, stuff like that. Um, being a writer, uh, uh, stuff around that. Like you don't need a communications degree to do it. The only purpose, and like I said, like I said, the small career field around communications, you're competing with a lot of other people who probably have more, who probably have a more extensive education than you do. So if you going into that same, if you're looking for those same small, uh, select jobs that fall within communications, quote unquote, then you're going to be competing for those folks. And again, you're going to be competing with people who may be more educated than you, but probably don't even have a degree in communications. That's a bullshit degree. Same thing with criminal justice. Most career fields in criminal justice don't even require a degree. And the ones that do require a degree in criminal justice don't need you to have a degree in criminal justice. You can literally have a degree in anything as long as you have a degree. Like, for instance, there's a lot of police now that require a degree, whether 2 year or 4 year, but it can be in anything. They just want you to have a degree for your career, so that you could, for career advancement, right? But they don't say it has to be in criminology, criminal justice. They don't. It can be in anything. Um, so those are, those are the two like prototypes of a bullshit major. Also, as I stated before, any major ending, and I'm talking about on the undergrad level because people always want to check me on this, and I'm like, I'm not talking about graduate level. I'm talking about undergraduate level. Anything that ends in a studies or management is a bullshit degree. Family management, family studies, American studies, African American studies, Asian studies, health management, business management. These are all bullshit degrees. These you don't they first of all, anything that ends in studies, there's no career. There's no career that correlates to something ending in studies. Like you're not gonna look in the classifieds And yeah, I know people say, "Oh, no one looks at the classifieds anymore." That's not the point. The point is when you're looking for jobs, whether it's the classifieds, LinkedIn, Indeed, whatever you platform you use, there's nothing correlating to any major that ends in the word studies. That affix on any major is a red flag that that major is bullshit. Same thing with management, but only on the. But when I talk about management, people always get confused here. I'm not talking about graduate master's levels degrees. I'm talking about undergraduate level degrees. There are no undergraduate degrees ending in management that are useful. On the master's level, yes. The difference is when you're talking about a master's level degree that ends in management, that is usually a degree directly tied to someone's employment. Those are not useless degrees. That's completely different. I'm talking about on the undergraduate level. There's no majors tied to those majors. Only on the graduate level they are. So anything that ends in studies or management is a bullshit degree. Criminal justice is a bullshit degree. Communications is a bullshit degree. And generally anything that does not any major generally that does not lead to a direct career path can be considered a BS major, especially if the very career path you're seeking doesn't require that degree. However, there are many liberal arts degrees that actually do require you to have that very liberal arts degree to get into that career field. For instance, art history. Art history is not a bullshit major because you to get into art history you actually need to know that information. You need that degree to get into that field, art history. Same thing with English, English lit. If you plan on being an English teacher, and I'm not talking about in a foreign country where you just need to be an American, an English speaking American with a 4 year degree. Like if you go to Japan and they have that great tutor program where they hire college college grads from America or the UK to teach in Japan. I'm not talking about that. That is great. So about here in America, if you plan on becoming an English teacher, yes, you need an English degree. Same thing with theater. Now again, these are the ones that's often poo-pooed upon the English lit degree, the theater degree, the art history degree. The funny thing is those majors ge- generally have a specific career path. The problem with them is that there's so few positions in that line of work is what makes it not you was often is what not makes it worth pursuing because it's such a small number of available jobs in art history or in theater or in teaching English, but they're not BS degrees. They're just not they're just not as useful just because there's not very many jobs available for them. Likewise, science degrees fall under STEM. However, not all STEM fields are equal to each other. Undergrad science degrees are largely useless, and I have I have a liberal arts degree and I have a science degree. Undergrad science degrees are largely useless unless you've taken it all the way to the graduate level. I've talked about this a million times. For instance, general biology is the most useless degree in all of science. I would hazard to say that psychology is a more useful science degree than general biology. Yes, I went there. Um, Now I'm gonna get to the comments in a sec, in a sec, folks. Um, just let me finish my tirade here. Uh, Undergrad science degrees are largely BS degrees because you can't do anything with them um, if you don't take it to the graduate level. Literally, the only thing you can do with an undergrad science degree, whether it's psychology or biology or chemistry, is be a research assistant. That's it, research assistant. The problem with the research assistant's jobs are one, these are not careers; these are just stopgap jobs. That's one thing. These research assistant jobs are stopgap jobs. They're not careers. The second problem is those research assistant jobs are you usually compete. You're going to have to compete with people who have graduate degrees for those same positions because often those research assistant jobs are coveted by PhD students to help them pay their way through school. They will take up a research assistant job. So again, so you're competing with people with with graduate degrees for those same research assistant jobs, which are already low paying low paying jobs. So unless you plan on taking an undergrad science degree all the way, which is a master's, if not a doctorate, then they are largely useless. They're not practical degrees. So they will fall into what my camp of BS degrees. If so, that's how I distinguish BS degree from non BS degree. It has to be practical. If it's not practical, it doesn't matter whether it's STEM or liberal arts. The My distinction is that they're useful, or that is practical. If it's not a practical degree, then it's a BS degree. Now let me get back to the comments. I think I had a few. Thanks to Kick the Theatrics for um, silencing these trolls. And for the person who my moderator kicked out of the chat saying he has a STEM degree, I must be a moron making these assumptions. I must be brainwashed by the government. This is why you need a liberal arts degree because even if this person does have a STEM degree, he never learned how to think critically. They kind of hint on that in the movie, the classic '80s movie Real Genius. The smartest person in the film was a guy who had a a mental breakdown going to college in the '70s, and he's been living in within the walls of the of their dorm for like 20 years or something like that, and it was because he was making something as a student that he didn't realize was killing people because he was all about the equations. He never thought about the human aspect of what he was doing. This is a problem with someone who's just all engineering. Like they don't like they lack a certain. And I'm not going to say all engineering students, by the way. I'm just saying the that sort of thinking where it's all just you know black and white, and things get messy when you talk about things on when you talk about behavioral research and social research. We realize how messy it is dealing with people. So it was good he got kicked out because he wasn't adding anything to the chat. Uh, but again, there's a lot of you know foolish people in these YouTube chat room spaces. Um, Shane Legg says, I think BS majors have value when they're used to supplement a degree that's already practical on their own. They may not do much, but pair with a solid primary field, they can round you out. Good call on that. You already jumping the gun on where I'm gonna go with this, but yeah, you're kind of getting to something that I'm gonna say. Carter says, "Facts, brother." Kicked the theatrics as computer science. I only have 2 years left. Wait, you went back to school? Um, Computer science is definitely a practical major. So again, I went over this in a previous live stream. So I distinguish what were BS majors, and I'm going to give a defense of BS majors. I'm just kind of peppering it up first, saying this is what. First, I went over what's the history of BS majors, and I said that up until the 70s and 80s, there really wasn't a BS major because there wasn't that many people going to college. So literally any 4 year degree was your entry ticket into the professional managerial class up until about the 80s when more people from the lower classes started filtering into higher education. So the elite had to dist- um, distinguish themselves from the hoi polloi. So around the 70s and 80s, they started going only for degrees, professional degrees, which was typically medicine, law, engineering, and for the the majority of the elite who weren't smart enough to follow a path into medicine or law, engineering, they usually got an MBA. The MBA became the the sine qua non of the educated elite up until the 90s when again the middle and lower classes caught on because again like I said the middle and lower class is always 2 steps behind the elite and once they start imitating what the elite are doing the elite already have start doing something else so once people from the middle and lower classes who made it into higher ed started going pre-med and pre-law business students and all that stuff, the elite moved on to the liberal arts and figured that, you know, it would be more useful for them to distinguish themselves from the lower classes by taking majors which aren't useful because it shows that they don't really need it. Um, oh, you said no, I'm not done, but I'm thinking ABAC University later. Oh, okay. In 2026. So someone asked me how many college degrees do I have. So I do have a few. I used to show them on my wall when I would do these live streams when I would do videos. I just stopped doing it. For one, I didn't want to keep exposing my real name on my videos because I got a couple of trolls and once you started having more people when you're interacting with you in your live streams you kind of want to protect your identity from these retards. Um, and also, I just didn't feel the need to keep proving that I'm smart to people by having my degrees in the background while I talk to people. So I stopped doing that. Anyway, so um, like I said, so what I said in the beginning is that when you first look at 19th and 20th century education in the West, at least, there really was no distinction of of BS majors because again, it was only the elite pretty much going to college. And it wasn't because college was expensive, because as I already established, college was largely free for most students. It was either free or it was very low cost. So that wasn't why only elite went. The reason only the elite went was because usually they were the only ones that followed through all the way with their uh with their high school education. A lot of people dropped out um so they can make money for the family. There was a lot of people, and I talk about this when I was talking about the black community, like how I said it was usually I said I had to give my um tip my hat to black women in the black community for um encouraging their sons to go off to college because usually their fathers didn't. The fathers were all about you need to get out and go make money, and that was such a blue collar way of thinking. And that's like I said, that's how it's largely been in America. Like usually, and that's also another point against the feminists who always try to say, well, black, men kept them from going to school. No, that was not true. Now, what was the case is that there was a separation of college for the elite institutions like the Ivy League schools and the other elite institutions that only allowed male and usually white male students. But there were female colleges that came out as a result. Like I said, Mount Holyoke and Bryn Mawr and all those other ones. I think it's like four of them. They were called like the female Ivies, like these four elite all female colleges. And they're still around today, but now they're either co ed or they're partially co ed, whereas they allow their graduate programs are co ed. Um, and so it was more often the case that women went off to college than men because usually the men were required to start work in the fields or working in the factories right out of high school if they were even allowed to finish high school. Most of them didn't finish high school. They went right on into the working world um, as teenagers. So it wasn't the fact that when that one troll earlier was saying college is a scam because only the privileged could afford it. It wasn't that only the privileged could afford it. It was only that the privileged could uh, finish school so they could go on to college. And since there was so few people in higher ed other than the privileged, there was no such thing as a BS major back then because any major that led to the completion of a 4-year degree was basically your entry into the professional managerial class. And for the few people who came out of the middle and lower classes, especially around the 40s uh, when they created the GI Bill, so that all these people coming out of the war, could do something with themselves, they went on to college. Like they found themselves in that sweet spot in the 50s and 60s. Like this is why the 50s is so fondly remembered. It's not people always try to shit on uh boomers and the silent generation for loving the 50s. They don't love the 50s because of the racism and misogyny and anti-communist era and all that. That wasn't what they loved the 50s for. Because look, there was a lot of strife going on in the 50s too that they didn't like. The reason why they love the 50s so much is because America was largely prospering at that time. You had minorities even before, the 1964 Civil Rights Bill, make starting to make it out of the uh out of the lower classes at that time. And you had a lot of people moving into the suburbs, people owning homes, that sort of stuff. Thank you for the gift, Tyson. um I don't know how to remove that, but okay. But anyway, um the what I want to say. So, like I said, at the very history, I mean, at the very beginning, like there was no BS majors because, like I said, any major at the time that led to a 4 year degree completion put you into the professional managerial class. Once the lower classes, the middle classes started filtering into higher education in the 70s and 80s, that's when the elite started going, um, steering themselves into professional degrees. And so those other sorts of programs were considered BS majors, basically because that was a way of separating themselves from the lower classes who were filtering into those other, um, majors that didn't lead to professional degrees. And then it became very specific majors at that. Like I said, English and communications and criminal justice, and history and art and philosophy and all that sort of stuff. One of my degrees is philosophy. You can consider it a bullshit degree, but here's the thing, here's the thing. Yes, I'm doing my Dr. Umar. That's one thing Dr. Umar does get right. Saying stuff 3 times does kind of make it more salient. But the thing of that is, there's, like one of my professors said, there's really only 3 majors in college that actually teach you how to think. That is math, physics, and philosophy. That's pretty much it. Not only that, in this time of AI and Silicon Valley developing all these, social media platforms that are heavily dependent on, you know tech, the newest innovations in technology. They actually wanted the people working for them to have a background in philosophy. So you started seeing these people with computer science degrees and software engineering degrees going back to school to learn philosophy or linguistics or English so that they could train their AI and better develop their tech so that it could actually reflect how people actually behave when using these tools on their social media platforms. So philosophy is actually very useful. Not only that, in this time where a lot of jobs are going to become automated, it's the professional trades that are going to be automated first. The most, if you, the degrees that is going to be most resilient against, uh, automation are going to be in the liberal arts. You're not going to AI philosophy. Okay, you're not going to AI philosophy. So shame. It's not really a shameless plug, but you might want to consider philosophy as a possible degree if you want something that can be, something that won't be taken away from you by AI in the future. Philosophy. You cannot AI philosophy. At least not anytime soon, if ever. Um, oh, I didn't have any more messages after that one Tyson left. I thought people were still okay. Good, so I can move on then. So again, now that I've established what BS majors are, they are the major. Like I said, there's two definitions of BS majors, and so the one that people use, the subjective definition of a BS college major, is usually anything dealing with liberal arts or social science. My uh, narrower scope of BS majors are just degrees that don't lead that aren't practical for any particular career. Um, and that can be in both STEM and liberal arts. But again, I'm going to give like a partial defense of these BS majors, particularly the ones of the former category that are just everything that's thrown in that's not STEM. I think that's such a goofy thing to throw everything that's not STEM into the camp of BS major. And this was usually done by again a bunch of red pillars and people in the manosphere, as well as people who are just these hard edged engineering computer science bros that think anything that's not engineering or computer science is useless. That's just not true. And I've already I've already let the cat out the bag earlier, but a lot of some of you didn't hear that, so I'll repeat it, which was when one of those trolls was saying something, I basically let it out the bag why what my defense of BS majors is, which is that statistically speaking, you will make more in your lifetime if you have a major. I mean, if you have a degree, than if you don't have a degree, regardless of the degree. Now, this is where I always dis. I like Charlie Kirk, but this is where I always disagree with him when he said college is a scam, which is what this person was obviously repeating. And it's like you're not Charlie Kirk. Like he's successful, but he was also a pretty smart guy. That troll, however, was not smart, and it's just the same as these people who used to say like 10, 20 years ago, well, Bill Gates didn't get a college degree. Mark Zuckerberg didn't get a college degree. Yeah, but the difference is they are smart and you are not. They are geniuses. You are not. They were accepted into the Hopkins program for gifted students when they were kids. You were not. On top of that, both Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg went to Ivy League schools before they dropped out. You did not. And also, if anyone's asking me any question that has nothing to do with my topic, I'm going to ignore you unless you drop a super chat. I am not here to give you free information if you're not going to if you're not going to even contribute to the very conversation of what we're having here in this chat room. If you're not contributing to the conversation in this chat, then I'm going to ignore you and drop unless you address your question in the form of a super chat. That's my first and only warning. Any case, moving on. So people saying, "What's your topic?" Why would you click on the live stream if you don't know what the topic is? I really have no patience for that. The topic is the defense of BS college majors. So again, in defense of BS college majors. So what I was saying to that troll earlier is how I'm defending BS college majors is that statistically any college degree is going to help you earn more in your lifetime than without having one. And even if you say like Charlie Kirk and others have said, and Charlie Kirk was right to point this out, by the way. I don't, it's not that I disagree with him, it's just that I think he didn't follow through all the way in this line of reasoning. So Charlie Kirk's rebuttal was that, yeah, statistically speaking, more if you make more if you have a college degree, but that's only because that's the but he was saying that, that's only because that statistic is skewed by the the people who go on to get professional degrees, who make up the bulk of those people making the most money, that that basically makes it look like everyone is earning more. And that was a legitimate criticism that Charlie Kirk has. That was legitimate criticism. However, my counterpoint to him, if I were able to actually have a debate with him, would be that yes, that is true. However, we live in an era of credentialism, and just to get an entry level job nowadays will still require a degree, even if that job itself doesn't really need a degree to perform that job, because we live in an age of credentialism. Like, it is so absurd nowadays that they are requiring like people who do daycare to have a degree in childcare. Like, since when do you need a degree to give out, you know, fruit juice and cookies and let kids take a nap? Like, it's crazy to require someone to have a degree in childcare education to run a daycare. But yeah, we live in an age of the credentialism, whereas you need a job. I mean, you need a degree to get just an entry level job. So yes, you will earn more by having a degree, even if it's not a professional degree. Not only that, you often need to have job experience on top of having the degree. And people used to always be miffed, like, how the hell are they asking for like, how the hell are they asking for 5 years degree, 5 years experience on an entry level job? And that goes back to the fact that they want you to do internships. The problem is that higher ed does not require people to do an internship to finish their degree, whereas overseas they do. In my wife's country and in several other countries, the last step of finishing your degree is doing an internship. So just like when you go to medical school, um, when you're in medical school, you do like your 3 years of coursework and and labs and all that sort of stuff. But then before you receive your medical degree, you have to you have to do usually have to do 1 year of internship, or residency or whatever. And that's usually like the toughest thing because they're usually up all night. I mean, like they're up like the, it can be a 24/7 sort of thing where like they're on call any time of day. Um, and it becomes, I think the residency is more of a rites of passage than something that you really need to know how to, you really have to do. But it gets you it gets your nose right into the whole clinical experience. And so a lot of jobs require students to have internships. However, higher ed doesn't require students to do internships to finish their degrees, even though the very jobs that they want usually require them to have some sort of internship experience. And so, like I said, BS major or not, you're better off having a degree than not having a degree once you go into the working world, because again, most entry level jobs are requiring you to have a degree, regardless of what that degree is in. Um, unless you're going into the skilled trades, and then the skilled trades you need that certification in that skilled trade, which is pretty much equivalent to the college degree. Either way, going into the working world, if you do not have your certification in that skilled trade, or if you do not have some 4-year degree, you're gonna be shit out of luck. And like I said, people, like a lot of red pill people saying just do a skilled trade, don't go to college because college is a scam. No, it's not. Now, what I will say is that the skilled trades often pay more than many of the jobs you get um, coming out of college into an entry level position. So I will admit that yes, the skilled trades will often pay you more, but the problem is, again, not everyone wants to work with their hands. Not everyone wants to be an electrician, a plumber, a HVAC technician, a welder, all that sort of stuff. Those are very fine jobs, by the way. I'm not shitting on them by any means. I had a skilled trade as well. I was a cable technician. So I had both my skilled trade and I had my college degrees, plural. I saw the need. I saw the expedience of having both a skilled trade and a degree. That's one of my things that my father wanted me to do when I went to the army. He said you need to learn a skilled trade so you can have that to fall upon. So that's what I did, and then I also got my college degrees. Um, anyway, let me drink some water, guys. Losing my voice. Mm. Bacardi says need to know CPR for emergencies for daycare. Yeah, that doesn't require a degree. You can you can learn CPR within uh one. That takes a two. That's a 2 hour class. I took it when I used to work as a when I used to work in my gym in my at the campus gym of my school. Actually, I even learned it before that. Like we we learned basic life saving skills in the army, and then like basically I did it again when I became a an employee at my campus recreational center. That takes 2 hours. That's like that's a 2 hour class. That is not a degree. I have no I have no problems with someone in daycare learning CPR. That I don't, if they have to be CPR certified, that's quite fine and dandy. I'm talking about the fact that they are requiring people to have full degrees to do daycare. You should not need a degree again to watch little kids. That's just stupid. You give them video games, TV, toys, snacks, and make sure they don't kill each other. Like that's it. That does not require a degree to do. That is the problem with credentialism. And like I said, it's credentialism that now leads you to have to need a degree. Even back in the 90s, like these entry level jobs in retail required a degree. Like if you were like uh if you wanted a job starting out in the entry level management, say at like J.C. Penney's, Montgomery Ward's, Hex, Nordstrom's, uh, wherever, like they wanted like a 4-year degree. For what? To for what? How how like I'm sorry, how is a 4-year degree in, I don't know, geology necessary to manage, to help manage a department within Sears men's fashion. Yeah, that geology degree is really gonna pay off there. That's credentialism. Like you, it should entry level management should not require a 4 year degree. But again, remember what I said. The history of the degrees was that back in the early 20th century and late 19th century, those degrees were basically your entry into the profession, the professional managerial class. So it didn't matter what your major was. And nowadays, it's necessary. And like I said, because so many people have gone on to higher education, that 4 year degrees have lost their value, and they're losing more value now because of AI. As more people are using AI to do stuff that used to take actual, studying and research to do, it is devaluing it is devaluing the college degree. And even so, again, remember what I said earlier was for you, or for you folks who weren't in my live stream earlier. As I said earlier, the lower and middle classes are always 2 steps behind the elite. So the elite, again, in the 70s and 80s, has started steering towards professional degrees to distinguish themselves from the hoi polloi that was starting to filter into higher education, and it already became a mark of distinction to have a professional or graduate degree by the 80s, even the 70s, for like the really like elite, like um so nowadays the nowadays the master's degree is the bachelor's degree. I'm just going to say that now. The master's degree is the bachelor's degree of 40 years ago. Shit, of 50 years ago, really. The I would say the master's degree is the bachelor's degree of 50 years ago. Uh, However, don't do MBAs. The MBA is the bullshit major of graduate school. I'll say that again. The MBA, the Masters of Business Administration, is the bullshit major of of graduate degrees. You don't need it to go into the fields that you want. The MBA was highly lofty in the 80s and 90s, where it reached its, and I'm glad I didn't pursue one because I almost did. The MBA, the MBA is like in the 90s was like the coup de grace for someone who wanted like a professional degree or graduate degree, but wasn't smart enough to go into like medicine or law or engineering or physics or science. Like they got the MBA. The MBA was that mark of distinction for people who weren't smart enough to go on to other programs. I don't know how else. I'm sure there was a nicer way to say that, but I think that was the most honest way I could say it. Um, Let me find some more comments here. Um, Someone said they lost that I lost them as a fan. Oh well. Uh, David says my journeyman's card earned me more than many with degrees. Yeah, so I've already touched on that a skilled trade, once you get that certification, and not only the certification, but once you become a journeyman in a professional in a particular trade, once you get that journeyman, that the journeyman, that's like I would say that journeyman's card is like the doctorate of skilled trades, right? I would, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I would say more or less the journeyman credential is the skilled trade. the blue collar equivalent of a PhD, the journeyman card. My only like I and like I said, I don't shit on people who go the blue collar route and decide they want to do a skill trade. Skill trades are necessary for society and they pay well and they're masculine. My so you will never hear me shitting on people who go the blue collar route, who go the skill trade route, who go the military route. I will never shit on that. Never. I have two critiques though. My first critique is just that not everyone wants to work with their hands. That's the problem. Now I am comfortable doing both because again, I learned the skill trade in the army and did it when I came out of the army, at least briefly. And I also pursued my higher education in things that were very lofty and not practical at all. Cognitive science, um, where I was a triple, excuse me, I was a triple major in psychology, philosophy, and linguistics. And then I went on to grad school for psychology. That education is still undergoing. My I have not completed my graduate education yet. It's still stuff I want to do. But again, I did it from both sides. I listened to my father and got a skilled trade while I was in the army, and I went on to school and did what I actually enjoyed because I knew I had my skilled trade to fall back on. That was the good thing because a lot of people are told by their parents to only take something in STEM or they because often like especially if your parents are paying for school, they'll say, I'm only paying for you to get a useful degree. If you take something else, you're on your own. This is why so and we've seen this in movies too, right? Where the kid actually wants to do theater or dance or English lit or something like that, but the parents like, you're not gonna waste my money, you better go on and do engineering or business or computer science or something like that, right? So I didn't have that. Well, for first of all, my parents weren't paying for college anyway, so I could do whatever the fuck I want. Two, even if they were, again, you couldn't come. There's no way they could complain because I had I had learned a skill trade in the army, and I was still actively in the reserves while I was in college. So I could always fall back on the army at that time or on the skill trade that I learned while I was in the army on the civilian side. So I was covered. So that meant whatever I wanted to study in college, I got a free pass, more or less. Timothy says you don't need a degree if you do the work a man does. That's just not true. Again, skilled trades are highly technical nowadays. Like even like yes, I am a vet. Even if you go to be a car mechanic, it's not like people still have this idea of the car mechanic being this guy with the greasy knuckles, the greasy hairy knuckles bent over a car hood, just tinkering around with a wrench. No, it is highly technical. Like they are working with computers, like especially because most, I mean, think about it. Most cars are are computerized. You look at the interior of your cars; they are highly computerized, which means to work on those systems in your car, you need to know your way around computers. So to say you don't need a degree to do the work a man does is just incorrect because even the skilled trades are highly technical today. That's what I'm trying to say. A lot of what's going to happen is that a lot of people of lower cognitive ability, again, this gets into previous live streams I've done before, people of lower cognitive ability are just going to be left shit out of luck. This is why the government has been toying around with the idea of a universal basic income because they know that as society becomes more technocratic, the folks who don't have the intellectual capacity to do those sorts of things are going to be left behind. And it's like they're going to either be a they're in danger of becoming a permanent underclass because the elite will be made of the wealthy elite will become the cognitive elite, people of higher cognitive ability or of different sorts of musical or athletic talents. The people without these talents and cognitive ability are going to be left in a permanent underclass unless something is done, because even again, even blue collar excuse me, even blue collar work is going to become very technological. And so, like I said, you can say even the work a man does. I'm telling you, blue collar work is becoming very um, tech intensive. And like I said, I'm not going to, and like I said, I already said, I'm not shitting on skilled trades, but I am defending BS college majors because, again, the stats show over and over that people with college degrees are going to make more in their lifetime than those who don't. And the reason being is that most jobs require degrees for entry level positions. You can go, I mean, don't have to take my word for it. You can go on Indeed or LinkedIn and start applying for jobs, looking for jobs. Almost all of them are asking for a degree. Oh, it's late, so I'm about to get off soon. So, plus it's, dude, I don't know why you're trolling. Like, you're not, if you're not even American, why are you even in this conversation? You're talking about Charlie Kirk forever. Are you even American? If not, you, this is not relevant to you. You need to stick with the EU concerns. And again, my point, so I'm making several points, guys, okay? So again, as the title implies, in defense of BS college majors. So one thing I want to say is no matter what you do after you come out of high school, you need either a skilled trade certification or a college degree, because we live in a society of credentialism. If you have no credentials, you are not going to get a job outside of Walmart or McDonald's. And even those jobs, if you want to go on to become managers, still want degrees. Um, and the problem is telling people, well, just get a trade, is that those trade schools are just as expensive as college. This is what my criticism was. Like, I remember when one of my parents was like, well, why don't you go on? You ever thought of doing truck driving? Like, fuck no. I was like, I didn't say it that way, by the way. But I was like, no. I was like, the money I would spend going to truck driving school, I might as well go ahead and go back to graduate school. Like, I'm not going to spend the amount of money to get a fucking CDL, then get a master's. Plus, the CDL is not that useful. Like, first of all, those unless you're working for like a commercial truck liner, like that drives interstate, um, you're not going to make that much unless you own your own company with your own fleet of trucks. Like the only like because they always say, "Oh, we make over six figures." No, you're not. Unless you own your own fleet of trucks, your own company, you are not making money like that. On top of that, that is one of the first jobs that's about to be automated within 5 years. They are already testing self-driving tractor trailers. That job is going to be so quickly automated. I feel sorry for all those truck drivers. And I truck drivers are truck drivers are the unsung heroes of our economy, because without them, we wouldn't get our stuff. um, but again, trade school is just as expensive as college. So you're still going to be applying for the same loans and grants and scholarships as college students. That's number one. Two, again, like I said, not everyone wants to work with their hands. But like I said, I think a good option for, if you do want to go the skilled trade route, is to go is to enlist in the military. The problem is, like about 75% of the country doesn't qualify for the military. And I'm not even exaggerating. Like 75%, and I'm actually being generous by saying 75%. It's actually more than 75%. But 75% of the country does not qualify for the military. Either they're not they're not physically fit, they're not mentally fit, or they can't get a high enough score on the ASVAB, or they have uh legal and personal problems that would prevent them from being able to enlist. So that's the but the military would be your best option if you wanted to do a skilled trade and not have to pay for it out of pocket, would be to do the military. But again, the problem is 75% of the country doesn't even qualify for the military. You said some actually do make six figures. I don't know. No, I didn't say truck drivers don't make six figures. That's not what I'm saying, brother. What I'm saying is that large, like, so truck driving, especially like in the 70s and 80s, was often a good way for people to. That was a good job to make it solidly into the middle class, right? Like you have certain blue collar jobs that will instantly propel you into a higher echelon of social economic status. That was truck driving, law enforcement, military, um, postal service, right? But what I was saying is the majority of them don't make six figures, and the ones who do usually own their own trucks, right? The driver those truck drivers who own their own trucks, have their own fleet, own their own company. Those are the ones who are making like serious money, or the ones who drive interstate. But the funny thing is, everyone thinks all truck drivers are interstate drivers. They're not. Most truck drivers drive locally. Like, I think most people, when they get their CDL, assume that they will get a interstate sort of job. But the thing is, a lot of folk, a lot of truck drivers don't want those interstate jobs because they're always on the road. But if you already have a family, you want to be close to your family. You don't want to be driving from you don't want to be driving from Pennsylvania to uh to Milwaukee every other week, or like, you're going you don't want to be, old Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China. Or maybe you do, I don't know, but I'm just saying, driving from Pennsylvania to Milwaukee, then down to Phoenix, then to Des Moines, and then over to Houston before you can get back to Pittsburgh, kind of sucks if you have a family. Now, if you're single, if you're single and you just out there, wanting to have fun, then the interstate life ain't that bad. Plus, some people bring their wives and girlfriends with them along their journeys. Like, that's always a that's always an option. But hopefully you you guys get along. I couldn't imagine, being on a 12-hour trip with someone you can't even stand. Like, bitch, will you shut up? I'll talk to you when we hit I-7. Until we get to I-7, you shut the I. Fuck. No, but seriously. Let me drink some water. drink water. But yeah, so my problem my problem is basically why I'm defending BS college majors is because we live in this credentialless society where even a daycare worker needs a fucking degree just to watch a bunch of little kids drink apple juice and eat cookies. And like the stats don't lie. Um the the problem with the stats is that it doesn't tell you the reason. It just the stats say yes, you'll make more over you'll earn more in your lifetime if you have a college degree than if you don't have one. But it doesn't tell you why that's the case. It doesn't tell you that's because all these people use are requiring degrees in entry level positions. And there's another reason, and there's a deeper level to that too. So the credentialism, there is another reason behind the credentialism, and the the reason why there's so much credentialism is because those degrees are basically a sneaky way of saying, okay, this person is smart enough to do this job. That's what it's really doing, because it was deemed unconstitutional about 30, 40 years back when some jobs started trying to require people to um, take IQ tests for admission for job acceptance. That was taken to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was ruled unconstitutional to require prospective employees to pass an IQ test for job acceptance. So what did they do instead? So the jobs who had so the bigger business firms that had money, what they did is they hired uh, what's called IO psychologists, industrial and organizational psychologists, to devise um, job specific tests um, for their companies for their entry level positions. That's why if you some of you, if you've applied to maybe a retail store or some other job, they actually you may have remembered actually having to take a test before you got the job, and that was created by these organizational psychologists. It's called IO psychology, industrial and organizational psychology. These big, like I said, these big firms hired these folks to make job specific tests for their prospective employees to pass in order to get the job, because they could no longer require prospective employees to take an IQ test. But what's a quicker way of doing this that doesn't cost the jobs money? Instead of them making a job specific test, and because they can't require an IQ test, what's the easiest path forward for these jobs? Oh, we'll just require them to have a 4 year degree, even though this job doesn't really need a 4 year degree to do it. That's the rise of credentialism. Credentialism is a way of saying this we can trust this person to do this job because this degree shows that they're smart enough to perform the duties. So so again, I usually don't give free advice, but I'm gonna give it one time here to the username at my dad loves you 8062, who asks, what's your best life advice? Stay physically fit. That's my best life advice. All right, moving on. When looking says at the top 10 companies featured on the S&P 500, which is one of the 10 that do you which excuse me, which is one of the 10 do you recommend investing in, and why? I'm not asking for financial advice, just curious about people's opinions. That's kind of a skew from my this conversation. And besides that, I don't want to I don't want to go above my pay grade here and suggesting what companies people should invest in. I'm not going to tell people how to invest their money. um, but I mean, if you're really curious, I mean, you can drop that in a super chat and I'll answer. But I don't want to give people I don't want to give people contentious advice. So so gloriously Swedish says I'm looking to being a politician. I was planning to get law and history degrees. It was so again. So politician again is a career path where you don't it where you need you typically need a degree, but it doesn't really matter what you're in. Now I will say this: most politicians' background is usually as a lawyer. Like if you look at most people in Congress, and that can be looked at both in a that could be both a bad thing and a good thing, but most people in Congress usually have law degrees. Um, that's what stood out about George W. Bush when he came into office because he was one of the few governors and now president who didn't have a background as a lawyer. You know, he had a GW G Dub. He had a master's in I believe business. He had an MBA that again that coveted MBA degree, which was such the high, which was just the tough shit back in the 70s and 80s. You had the MBA, you was you was on top of the world back then in the 70s and 80s with the MBA. By the 90s and 2000s, it became yeah, but yeah, I would say if you know if you're serious about you're serious about planning on by the way, I don't know what your age is. But if you're planning on being a politician, you don't necessarily have to get a do a degree uh, in political science or in history, but you should probably consider doing a pre-law program because you can do a pre-law program with any major, sort of like pre-med. Like pre-med, you can do with with any major. Pre-law, you can do with any major. So if you are looking into becoming a politician, I would say you might want to take up pre-law if you're an undergraduate student, and also you should probably try to shadow an actual politician, like probably like a lower tier, like because you know the the busier congressmen are probably not going to have time, but they're usually what you might be able to shadow like their their interns. Usually, many of the interns for these um, congressional members are have law degrees themselves, so they can give you the inside scoop of how Congress actually runs. Many of these interns that work for these Congress members, and usually at your school, depending on how good of a school you have, they'll probably have like a career center that will have like a um, a part where you can actually find people within the field that you want to pursue that are open to being shadowed by students. That's what I did. So I shadowed a clinical psychologist when I was in undergrad, and she made me want to become a clinical psychologist at the time. So much so that I actually switched my degree because I was originally pre med, or yeah, I was originally pre med, and my major was general biology, and I thought, well, I don't want to do psychiatry. I'd rather just do clinical psychology. Funny, I wanted to shadow a psychiatrist. That person wasn't available, so I shadowed a clinical psychologist. And then after the class was over, in which I needed a shadowing for, the psychiatrist was available, and I was like, no, I'm fine now. Like I've already shadowed someone else in a related field, so. And the psychiatrist was like, well, yes, but psychiatry and clinical psychology are different. and I was kind of rude. I wish I was not a rude person back then, but I said, well, yeah, the class is over, so I wasn't really interested anymore. I was like, I don't really want to do psychiatry. I'd rather do clinical psychology. So I switched my major to psychology as well. But that is important to, if available, is to shadow someone in the field that you plan on pursuing, so that you can kind of get a real feel for it from someone who actually does it as a living, as opposed to just seeing it on paper. It's different when you actually get to talk with someone and actually be around them as they're doing their job, as opposed to just reading about it. So I would do that and consider pre-law. Uh, he says, by the way, my channel name is Gloriously Swedish because I'm 1/8 Swedish. I actually live in Georgia, United States. Yeah, so sorry about that before. I thought you were just trolling earlier, so that's my bad. So apologies there. Um, that's funny. Um, like, you shouldn't be ashamed of your, that's cool that you're representing your ethnic ancestry. Big Kevin says you look Jewish. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, I do have Jewish ancestry, but at least according to my father, we have Jewish ancestry. But I don't know. I don't know how I look Jewish. I should ask. I should ask one of my Jewish friends, "Do I look Jewish?" So I gotta go. But thanks for the advice and information. And no problem. Gotta go myself. But yeah, eh, that advice goes to to anyone else watching this. Like, um, if you are considering a certain career path, you should try to shadow someone in that field, which is easier in college because they usually have the resources to um, to connect you with people that you can actually like contact and set up an interview with. Like, it might either be an interview, or they actually might allow you to follow them for a few days to see what their job actually involves. That, like, you don't have to do that through college, but it would be easier probably through a college because they would have the resources to connect you. Because usually it's like alumni to the school who are given back by letting undergrads um, you know follow them in their footsteps. I remember having some undergrads call me for, like, well, really, it was just to try to get me to donate money to the school. But they were asking me questions. They were just being good salespeople. Like, they were asking me questions about how it is as an alum, like what advice do I have to give them, and how do I feel about my career today, and all that sort of stuff. So, but it was basically just a way to try to guilt me into thinking, oh, I need to give back to the college kids, which I eventually did, but I didn't at that time. Did I? No, I don't. I don't think they guilted me into it. But yeah, so I'm about to go, guys. But if you're thinking about a particular field, again, don't worry about someone saying it's a BS major. If it will put you on the trajectory to getting the job or career that you want, by all means pursue it. And that goes for skilled trades too. Don't, because ironically enough, some people get the opposite treatment. So some people are born into families that are highly educated, and they're not interested in college. They're interested in going the skill trade route. Like, that person might want to be a welder or an electrician or a plumber, um, or many other skilled trades. and they might have like parents to have doctorates and stuff like that, and they're like, you need to go to college. So same advice. Don't listen to them either. Like if you want to do a skill trade, do a skill trade. They do earn a lot of money, especially today. My pushback on the red pill always saying do a skill trade is that my only problem with the skilled trades is they lack the social prestige of higher education, and that was one of my criticisms in a previous live stream against the red pill. Is they keep trying to shit on college degrees, and I was like, well, if higher education is highly feminized, then the the solution is not for all the men to defect to the skilled trades. First of all, not all men are going to want to defect to the skilled trades. And even if they did, that's not a solution. What we need are those very men to go into higher education to keep things balanced. You know, don't let the Sith take over. A balance in the Force isn't resolved by there being half good here and half evil here. The balance in the Force is by the absence of the dark side. So you got to push back against this feminization of higher education. Otherwise, we'll have a bunch of uh, erroneous information coming out of the ivory towers being pushed on us as truth. You'll have a bunch of people trying to rewrite the biology of sex, which has been known for over 100 years. That was defined by the gametes, and say that it's all about whether you feel like a woman or not. No. So we need men in higher education, masculine men in higher education. It's good that masculine men want to do skilled trades, but we still need masculine men in higher education, and not only in the STEMs. We need masculine men in the liberal arts and social sciences too, to keep them honest. Don't worry about someone telling you it's a BS major unless they're paying for it. Vice versa, if you are someone born into a lofty family of educated elite and they don't want you to do a skilled trade, again, pursue what you want to do. If you want to pursue that skilled trade, you also pursue that skilled trade. For for your educated elite family, they consider the skilled trade the BS the BS pathway. They're wrong too. All right. And again, BS major is a is a recent concept in higher education. Since the advent of college, since the time of Plato, when he created literally the academy, Plato's academy was the first university. Um, we often there wasn't a diverse amount of subjects you could take. Like everyone took the same thing pretty much. And yes, it was often the bastion of the privileged, but it wasn't because it was not affordable. It was because most people from the lower classes had to work, so they weren't able to pursue higher education. Not because it was expensive. Today, because more people can go on, because smart people exist in every social economic strata, the way to keep college bound people from going on to college is through higher costs. That's a recent thing. That wasn't a thing 50 years ago. But don't let someone talk you out of your BS major. If you want to do theater, you go ahead and do theater. However, 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 that is not going to be a high paying job that comes out of theater. On top of that, those jobs in theater are very small. Like there's very small amounts of positions for people with a theater major. So you might want to also do something practical. You should. This is why, at least, what most people were doing when I was going to college 25 years ago, was that a lot of people were doing double majors. The double major was usually, um, so people did a double major either for two reasons. Either one was the practical major and the other one was the fun major. So like theater was the fun major, and then you did something practical like computer science. And someone will look at it like, why are you double major in computer science and theater? Well, because I know I'm gonna get a job with computer science, but I really love theater. Which is also the reason for minors. So minors used to be bigger, I think, in the 80s and 90s. Like people would do a minor in something that they liked, something they were passionate about, but something that probably wasn't practical. That was the reason, the point of minors. But then people started deciding, well, I could just do a double major because then if I do a double major, it's gonna my second major is gonna cover all my electives that I need to take for my primary major. Okay. Also, the other reason um, for double majors is often the two the two majors were interrelated, like physics and astronomy. Like someone who is interested in pursuing astrophysics might take a double major in physics and in astronomy, or someone like me who was interested in cognitive science, I double majored in in psychology and philosophy, which then became a triple major because I added linguistics as well. So I was a triple major, but they were all interrelated. So usually the prerequisites for one were the um, prerequisites for the others. But don't let someone talk you out of your BS major. Just recognize that it probably is a BS major if most people don't think it's useful. However, not all liberal arts degrees are BS majors, and not all STEM degrees are practical majors. So I'm gonna end that here unless there was any other comments that I missed on here, which I don't think there was because it's late. Thanks to everyone who I talked to. Thanks for the gems as well, and hope I answered everyone's questions. But if not, keep the questions going in the comment section when this is when this goes up for rebroadcast. Okay, you can follow if I there were certain other questions related to this topic. Um, you can throw those in the comment section. So take it easy. Sorry for anyone just coming in, but the live stream is now ending. Appreciate it though.